All right, I'm going to start the stream just so we get the chat live, etc. But I have not started the recording yet, just FYI. Okay, stream does look like it is live. We have an excellent connection. Yeah. Also, we're undefeated, baby. Will we? Yes, exactly. Oh, full offense to anybody who's using Facebook, but I'm also a Facebook user, so who am I to talk? It's all right, man. I'm not running on a lot of sleep either because I was at board game night last night and we didn't get back till 12:30, and then I sat down to watch the Sharks game. So damn right, baby. Ooh. $167. Are we talking about game one, Alex? Oh, hold on a second. I'm actually not getting you guys actually captured over to the stream, so let me fix that. I'm glad he can't hear you. Hold on one second. Let me fix this. It's a good thing I noticed. Let's see. Okay.
Well, I've been reading too many Gerald.
I'm gonna quit Discord and come back to make this work. Oh, whoops. I started the recording, which I did not mean to do.
Oh, thank God, Ben's back. We don't have to have a fake conversation.
Okay.
Just
now I'm getting you guys. Now you hear fine to me for me, so
Whoa.
I think we are good to go.
You want to do a test check just to be sure?
Let's check and make sure Doug can hear you too, because I think Doug was only hearing me for a while there.
So, what about Doug?
Yo, chat
can
people.
You hear me?
Can you hear Colin and Alex as well as me?
Can you hear the important people on the podcast?
Like I said, can you hear me?
There are no important people on this podcast.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. Doug, give us a sign.
Doug has got all of our glorious voices now.
Oh, right. Did that show? Where did that show up?
Live chat. Oh. You might have top chat selected. If you're over in YouTube.
What the? There's a
I know,
live
right?
chat.
What a
Man,
bunch
I'm old.
What a bunch of bullshit. Okay, I'm gonna
Who made this?
I'm gonna start the recording.
Yes, I think that's fair to do. All right, you guys ready?
I was born ready.
All right. Taking a sip of that water. All right, here we go. Hello and welcome to Circling the Cup, San Jose Sharks podcast, episode number 167. And hey, we got something to talk about. It's a game. And when I say a game, I literally mean one game. But I guess there are three key words to today's podcast that I would like everyone to keep in mind. Small sample size. But that being said, a lot of fun. I am Alex. Here with me, as always, is the Honorable Ben. What's up, Ben?
Honorable. Nice.
I've been saying that for 6 or 7 years. Glad you noticed. And of course, live via Poltergeist. I don't even know anymore. Colin. What's up, Colin? How are you doing in Sweden?
Poltergeist. You need to write some down before.
Yeah.
Just off the cuff stuff is scraping the bottom.
I have a secret, everyone. It's all off the cuff. So, listen, Sharks had their first game of the season last night. And I'll tell you what, guys, I had a lot of fun watching that game. This is probably the most excited I've been in the last couple of years for Sharks hockey. Not necessarily just because of the team. I've not so secretly felt like the last 2 seasons shouldn't count, just because of how odd everything was. So sorry, Tampa Bay Lightning fans, but I don't really think you won some cups in there. But this felt like a regular season again, and not only that, we had a blast from the past back in. I don't know if you guys watched the pregame, but it was Drew Remenda and Brody Brazil. And I got to say, I've always been a fan of Drew's. In fact, Drew gave my eldest son his middle name at a fan fest. But it was so great to see him back. It was great to see him joking around. And not only that, but he played off of Brody Brazil really well. Now, we didn't have Curtis Brown, and, those two guys are fun together as well. We will later in the season, as we will have Dan Boyle, which is another awesome call because that's a guy that just needs to be on camera. But one of my favorite things about Drew being back was the fact that he gave a lot of really good insight, which was nice because for a while there, we weren't really getting a lot of that. And I'm not trying to slight anyone who was on the broadcast previously because, they all have their own merits, but nice to have a little bit of honesty in there. But it was also fun because, it started with Brody educating Drew on the Desert Dogs drinking game. And I have to be honest, I know Brody Brazil has made that a thing. Good for you, Brody. In the same way that Randy Hahn has also made the Long Beach native Matt Nieto a drinking game, which, by the way, Randy was in midseason form in that first period in terms of using that phrase. But I actually wanted to add a new one, and I think we need to find a way to introduce it to Brody and Drew. And that is, I don't know if you guys watched the post-game interviews, but I think, and I dare you actually, this is very dangerous, probably shouldn't dare you to do this, don't really do this, but I think you should try and drink every time Hurdle says in an interview.
Oh,
because
no. No.
Hello, alcohol poisoning. How are you?
Yeah,
exactly.
No, do not do that.
But anyway, it was really great. See Drew back. The pregame show was great. The energy was great. It was nice to have fans. We're going to go deep into this game because really this game is the only thing to talk about. And I'll tell you what, guys, before we go into like the minute to minute here, I'm just going to give my quick thoughts. And that is a lot of fun. There's definitely a different vibe. Now, again, I think some of that is just being able to have fans in the arena and having a proper atmosphere to a game. And even in the pre-show, people being outside and yelling and screaming was really awesome. But I tell you what, these guys, first game, small sample size, jitters and stuff that, still need to be ironed out and will be ironed out over the course of the season. But this definitely, to me, felt like a very different Sharks team. Not necessarily right off the bat, but as the game wore on. And I was pretty impressed with the youth. I did find it funny that there were a couple of moments of the game where it looked like Eklund and Hurdle collided, especially in the second period. And I kind of got the sense that Hurdle was saying, "Hey, guy, what are you doing on this side of the ice?" But that's going to happen, especially in the first game of a season, especially when you have so many really rookies, kind of playing the game. But my overall impression of the Sharks was pretty positive, pretty exciting, and it definitely, to me, felt like a new team and a little bit of the start of a new era. What was your guys' just overall feeling about the team in this game?
If you want a drinking game this season, you take a sip of your drink, every time Eklund slips a hit and makes somebody look like a jackass.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, it was pretty clear. I mean, he looks gangly on the ice, right? Because he's 19 and he's pretty skinny, not the biggest guy in the world. And you could tell there were a couple of times where Winnipeg was just trying to just hammer him.
Yeah.
And somehow he would just slink through every single time. Not always with the puck, but he just somehow got away. And I was really nervous about that coming in, not because I don't think he's got a good IQ and awareness, but again, he is. It's always that scary thing when you've got a young, budding talent like him on your roster who is a little bit on the smaller side, because the last thing you want is for him to be over his head and get hurt. but he just kept appearing.
Yeah, like the defender on Winnipeg, Stanley or whoever, is like
Yeah.
6'8", so he's a foot
Yeah.
taller than Eklund. Oh man. So yeah, it was
I
nice
mean,
watching this team.
his feet are bigger than Eklund. Let's be
Uh,
honest.
yeah, I think it was the second or third hit he got out of the way of. He actually swiped the checker's stick out. So the guy lost that extra little like pivot balance, and that was
Yeah.
part of the thing that met the person down. And I giggled. I just rewatched that over and over. But to be fair, it's one of those things where Eklund has to be 100%, because the second he eats one of those bad hits from somebody that big, oh, I don't want to see it happen.
Oh,
So
it was whack-a-mole last night. It was like he would pop up, they would try to hit, choose the wrong one, and he'd pop up somewhere else on the ice. I mean, he definitely did take a couple of hits in there.
Yeah, but from
But
well,
Sharks.
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
What I did love is, the hit that did spark something off was when Balsers got ran into Hellebuck by Connor,
Boy,
and then Pionk decided to get pissed, and then we got to see Angry Hurdle.
that was
Oh my
amazing.
goodness,
He
that
jumped
was
on a guy and was hitting him in the head.
he was.
Hurdle.
Oh my goodness, that was one of the most terrifying things I've seen in a Sharks uniform in a long time. And it made me kind of happy, but Uh, bef- before this game went down, we were chatting, and I wrote to Ben and Alex. I really wanted to see the Sharks come out fast. I wanted to see them come out at a high pace, really just start the game from the puck drop and then play the whole game through.
Right.
And I feel like we almost got that. Like there was a little bit of a dip in the second, or in the first, but then they came back in the second and third. Like they were outshot something like 6-10 in the first, and then they outshot the rest of the game. And like our offensive pressure and our ability to establish like long offensive shifts in the other team's zone wasn't really there, but we weren't getting stuck very often. Like we were having good transition through the zones. We were having good team support through the zones. And we had consistent lines mostly. Like the only major malfunction I saw in this game was whatever the hell was going on with Meyer's skate, because geez, he couldn't keep an edge. It seemed like one of his skates was just messed up because he just was going down left and right, and that was unfortunate. Though he,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think some of that first period, I think is understandable. I mean, I definitely, I felt good about the speed that they were going with, and I felt good about some of what they were trying to do. Now, their shots were sort of all over the place in that first period as far as like being on net and where they were putting it. But also, again, I think first game, first period, you're going to have that adjustment. And it was actually really interesting for me because in the first period, I texted some friends because they asked me how I was feeling, and I said, I feel like this is different. I feel like this team is missing a couple of elements just to kind of get them to where we want that next phase to be. And then I felt a little less so about that as the game went on. And again, I think that had a lot to do with them slowing down and settling, not necessarily slowing down their pace, but just shaking loose some of that, those start jitters and really starting to play the game that they wanted to play, and starting to sink in a little bit better. And I think, not everything was perfect this game, and I'm sure Ben will tap in on some of that. I was a little discouraged off the bat with some of the defensive play. I didn't particularly like some of the things that Carlson, for example, was doing, and I also kind of felt like Meyer, who I so desperately want to get back to form, was just not having the best time shooting or attempting to shoot. Some of that was just the position he was in. But again, first period, first game, you're going to run into that. What did you think, Ben?
Oh boy. Okay, so
Big handoff there.
yeah. I mean, I think that I see some good signs of new focuses that I hope we will see maintained through the next few games. But I also see some of the same problems that we've had in the last year, like I think you're talking about some of the defensive lack of coordination. I mean, the second goal was entirely on like why is Carlson not talking to
Aiden Hill.
Hill at
Yeah.
that point, right? Like Hill launches the puck into Carlson because Carlson's going after it. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think Hill. I think Hill should have, if he was going to grab that puck, he should have just fucking froze it
Yeah.
and
Yep.
just taken the reset. So it's on him as well for just deciding to shoot it. But why are they not yelling at each other? Right? It's a
Yeah.
problem we've seen for whatever reason with Carlson on the ice. Is the goalie and Carlson just never seem to be in sync. Um,
Yeah.
so that's problematic, obviously. From and our bottom pairing defense pair is fucking garbage. I don't know how Shimmick and Vlasic are the ones who both won, opening night duties, but you can't have both of
Mm.
those guys on the ice, and you can't have them paired with each other. I don't
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. I thought that
Um,
was weird.
it is. It's super weird, especially given that they were trying Sadaka or however you pronounce his name.
Hmm.
In a pairing with, I think that they had him mostly with Carlson. And I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Middleton was fine last night.
Fine.
Yeah, he was fine last night. Also, he beat the crap out of Logan Stanley, and I'm not a big fan of fights because brain damage. But at least he
Can I
didn't
ask you a
lose.
question
At least he didn't lose that
about that?
fight. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question about that? Is there some rule that the mustached guys have to be the ones that are always fighting? I just feel like the second he threw a fight, I was
Man.
like, oh man, and of course he has a mustache. Is that like, did Peros basically make that a requirement?
I think it's
Thank you.
actually. I think that's how Bogner knows who his designated fighter of the game is whichever guy shows up with the thickest, most goonish mustache. Yeah.
I agree. There was one comment that was made in the I don't know if you're watching the intermission stuff, Ben, but you
No,
would have
I
been
wasn't.
extremely excited. Oh, well, Drew Menda talked about that, and he literally said, I don't believe fighting has the same effect as it used to in the game, because
Never
it's a
did.
different game, obviously. He brought up, well, in the old school rough and tumble NHL, I think it made a bit more of a difference, but he seemed to be on the same page with that, and it was nice to hear a announcer essentially be like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I'm almost always in lockstep with Ben when it comes to fighting in hockey, but that was a good fight in my mind because the hit on ball search was trash.
It
Like that
was.
was an absolute trash. Just like
I
to
I
me,
guess.
that's a double minor. If not, just be like, no, out.
I mean, I get my
But
issue is that the excuse they will always make for why fighting remains in the game is that the refs are not taking care of people. But in that case, the refs absolutely did the right thing,
mhm.
and you still get a fight, which is just reminder that the narrative is all bullshit and whatever. I don't want to get stuck on that because there were a few other things I wanted to say. The first power play unit sucks, but the second one
Yeah.
looked really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not just saying that because they scored. If you look at the heat maps for that power play, they're really focusing on that Ovi spot, but not with either Burns or Carlson in this case. They had Weatherby there on the second power play unit, and actually the first power play unit, that was the only place they got any action, and I think it was Meyer on that wing at least at the beginning of the game. And I thought schematically even maybe the first power play sort of looked good once they got established in the zone, but their biggest problem is there's nobody on that group that knows how to get into the zone with that soft pass to the line, which is problematic, obviously.
yeah,
Um, they got a lot of good high danger shots, which the Sharks were not getting last year, so that was a good sign if they can continue it.
yeah.
Um,
There's some great passing there too. I will say there were a lot of really bad giveaways also, and I think we talked about this last podcast for the people who were like, why isn't Ryan Merkley in the lineup? The Sharks have plenty of high danger, reckless passing going on. Again, not necessarily needed from another player, but that was, I do want to highlight that was one of the things that I did bother me about this game. And again, some of that will be having the rookies in and jitters and stuff. But there were a lot of high danger giveaways, especially early on, that were fairly terrifying. Fortunately, Hill did a pretty admirable job in net for the most part. So I mean, that's something that in the past, you had that turnover, and I pretty much just assumed it was a goal. So,
Well, three things for me. First, I liked Brody flat out being like, this team seems different, and last season's Sharks going down 2-0 in the first, that's kind of game over. I was like, wow, that's refreshingly honest. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys about, two different players. Ben, what did you think of Ferraro?
Are you going to ask the second question, or are you just going to
Well,
wait for the answer?
I
there
mean,
was a specific play for the second player, so I want to sound out Ferraro first
I'll be
because
honest. I didn't really notice Ferraro very much in this game, except in the first
really,
period. Well, I'm not saying that is it's a bad thing because you really don't want to notice your defensemen who aren't, also pumping shots on goal. So
Yeah.
I guess what
point.
I mean by that is I was in any given shift, he was not the focus of my attention as to who was doing something particularly interesting or who was fucking it up. I guess that's the way I would put it.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm exactly in the same spot. I think it was fine, but it's nice to be able to look at a defenseman, to your point,
Yeah,
Ben, on this roster,
yeah.
and have them not be the focal point again because they're doing correct
Yeah.
things for the
And
most
and I
part.
know he was good because
Yeah.
he and Burns actually looked that defensive
Mm-hmm.
unit was not the problem last night, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I
Right.
didn't really notice him do anything particularly. And granted, I was watching the game between midnight and 2:30 a.m. here local time
Oh,
last night,
yeah.
so
See, I always notice Ferraro because I'm always trying to look for Couture and to see like how he's doing and like how he's playing off his line mates. And Ferraro is 39 and Couture's 38 or something like that. And so I'm always mistaking Ferraro for Couture, even though they don't skate in the same way, or it's just I blame it on
well,
not
their
watching the
numbers
game
really
live.
close,
Like,
right? You see the three, you
yeah,
see a not big
yeah.
dude skating, and I get it.
And there were a number of times I'm like, oh, look at Logan with the great. Wait, no, that's Ferraro. And as you guys say, the Burns Ferraro pairing was consistently not bad.
Now that you say
And
that, that was the one thing I did note in the first period was Ferraro did not just pinch, but like take a puck in deep and
Yeah.
take a shot at one point that did. I think when you say looked like Logan, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that
yeah,
exactly too.
like I've got this itch that Ferraro is just gonna do something really like he's gonna have a good season. He seems like he's pushing, and I love it. Like
Yeah,
I love his game, and I'm really looking forward to it.
it's
And
clear
there's a
that
reason they made him the alternate.
exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
Yep.
Is it's clear the Sharks see him as being a guy who has come in and done exactly what they want him to do, and not only that, they recognize that it's time to start to groom the young leadership, particularly
Yep.
on the defense,
I,
because you know Vlasic is going to fall apart sooner or
yeah.
later, and that's great. And he seems to have a really, I think, good approach to the game. A good approach. Clearly, the coaches love him because he's never gotten the treatment that some of those young defensemen get, where they're up in press box one night, in the game the next, 5 minutes
Right.
on the ice, whatever. Right. So I think it's the sign there is that he does exactly what the coaches want him to do. He
Well,
responds
Ben,
to their feedback, etc.
he's also an influencer, and it's great for PR. Speaking of leadership, I mean, one thing that I
Wait,
want
wait,
to
wait.
wait, hold on. Oh, one thing that I noticed is if you were to take a step back, and I'm not trying to pick a fight here between players by any means, but if you were to take a step back last night, or you were coming in, you didn't know, who would you assume the captain was? Because
Oh, Hurdle.
last night to me absolutely felt like just Hurdle was the leader in terms of pumping up the crowd, in terms
Yeah.
of the way that he was getting involved. I mean, it's
Look,
obviously
you guys,
a contract year.
I was on the Tomas Hurdle captaincy, all the way back, when they gave it to
Yep.
Couture, because
Yeah.
Yep.
of this, because he plays to the crowd, because he's fan favorite. He doesn't look like a horse. He's not the negative
Ouch.
Nancy in the
Rude.
locker room. So
Um,
yeah,
But
I
boy,
would-
especially with this crop of young
Yeah.
players. I mean, look, Balsers, right? One of my favorite moments of last night, because I hadn't seen the Sharks be involved in a situation like this before, was the Balsers goal where
Yeah.
Balsers gets a goal.
Yeah.
Then there's immediately a fight, and then the Sharks are on the power play to start on the faceoff, which is great. But throughout that entire sequence, Hurdle was just all over the place in the pack, and even when Weatherby scores, there's Hurdle goes up and pats his head like 10 times on the
Yep.
bench.
Yep.
It really feels like this team especially with this youth core,
Needs hurdle.
The answer would be hurdle.
Yep. So the other player, it's not going to be hurdle, but the other player I wanted to sound you guys out about was LeBanc. First, LeBanc backchecked, like backchecked hard on defense. I was impressed. Granted, one of those backchecks was because of a broken play on the power play, so he either backchecks or we get scored on. But so two-parter. Did you guys see anything from LeBanc that makes you feel like, yeah, he's like trying to step into his role? And do you think he should be sort of in that QB position on the power play?
I got to be honest with you. You know, and this probably will sound bad, but other than Hurdle and maybe Burns on and off, the rest of the familiar Sharks were really not what I was paying attention to. I was really looking at guys like Dahlin and Weatherby and Balsers specifically. In fact, I found it hilarious when he tried to get that empty netter, not realizing it would be an offsides or get called back, basically. Um, you know, I watched a bit of LeBanc, but I was so much more thrilled with guys like Cogliano, who really I was very surprised by his speed and by his tenacity. I mean, that guy was like the Energizer Bunny, and he's supposed to be one of our old wily vets. So, you know, it's not to say that I think LeBanc didn't have a fine game. I really felt like a lot of what attracted me this game was that energy that those new players brought, and not just because they were new. I think they legitimately brought just a new element. Now, again, it wasn't solid all the way through, and it took a little while for it to settle in. But again, there's just something about the changes that we made in the roster that gives this team a new vibe, despite the fact that we do still have a lot of similar players. I mean, I know that, when you look at it, I think we had like how many 7 new guys technically, but we also have a lot of like longstanding mainstays, right? Like the Burns or Vlasics that were there. So I'm not saying he was invisible, but if you ask me today how LeBanc did, I kind of feel the same way I felt about that Ben felt about Ferraro. Where like I don't recall.
I did notice LeBanc, but not where I normally notice him. I didn't notice him as much in the offensive zone, except for on a couple of zone entries. Where I really noticed him, and I think this is what you were saying, Colin, is I noticed him being pretty tenacious in the neutral zone defensively, pretty active, trying to gain the zone or regain the zone. Typically where I have noticed LeBanc primarily in the past is on the power play, and not that he was invisible on the power play, but that just wasn't where I saw him. I was watching two of our veterans closely. It was Timo and LeBanc, because both those guys need to have really good years if this team actually wants to develop into an actual playoff threat. And I thought Meyer had a very Meyerish game to the positive, in the sense that he got a bunch of pucks on net, and I think that we used to see that as a negative if he was taking shots from bad angles, but I did think that the Sharks were trying to put pucks just on net from bad angles in this game and have guys up close. That's how Eklund connected with Hurdle on Hurdle's goal, right? So I don't think that was like Meyer being Meyer. I think that was is a focus when the younger groups are on the ice. In other words, not the Bonino line, right? Because I think
don't
the Bonino
think
line.
Meyer.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna agree. I don't think Meyer took a bad shot. Like, there are a bunch of shots that were like, there's no way that's not getting stopped, but it's an offensive faceoff. Like, I thought he was taking smart, like sensible shots, and he was trying to take opportunities when he found them.
Yeah.
So I liked his offensive game, and I liked his energy. I just, for whatever reason, he couldn't keep his feet, and that's who knows
well,
what
that's
that
the
was.
Sharks'
he
ice
was
too, you guys.
Yeah,
It's typically. I mean, I'll be honest. I didn't think the ice was that bad last night compared to how it was, at the end of last season.
But yeah.
The puck didn't seem to be bouncing nearly as much as it does when that ice is in real bad shape. But I still don't think it's a great surface, even at its best. So
No, no, and I think Meyer was a bit, as Meyer has been lately. I think he was a bit unlucky on some of those shots as well. There were definitely
Yeah.
some where he didn't really have enough space or time to get a quality shot up. I will say though that while I thought Meyer played pretty well overall, I'm a little bit different in who I was focused on. I was focused on Meyer as
Right.
well, Ben, as far as the returning guys. The other guy I was obviously focused on was Carlson, and those are two
Mhm.
players who I still feel, and again, really small sample size, but I still need those two guys in particular to be better, especially Carlson. And that's not to say he didn't have moments where he did something really well. And again, same goes with Meyer. But if those guys can just, kick it up, in extra gear, this Sharks team becomes fairly dangerous fairly quickly, assuming that this small sample size actually becomes a positive trend and continues to carry.
Well, we'll see. My biggest critique on Meyer is his shift discipline, and
Mhm.
that's mostly because every time Meyer, took a too long shift, it meant that Eklund wasn't getting out.
Well,
So
I mean, it's not just that, but I mean, that
Yeah.
was a bad habit Meyer and Kane both had last year. I and
yeah,
I'm going to echo, so Dave in chat said he thought that Carlson was pretty good last night, and I do
hmm
too. I thought
yeah,
Carlson was pretty much, aside from the the goal where, again, he wasn't communicating appropriately with Hill, or Hill wasn't hearing him, or
yeah,
whatever. I thought Carlson was pretty good.
yep,
I didn't see a lot
I
of
felt like I
issues
had
with
a
his
lot of
game.
that. See, here's where you and I differ. Is I don't think he had a bad I don't think he had a bad game or his worst game by any means, and I think there were a lot of things he was doing right. I did notice, and especially in the first, and it did settle down. It often felt like he was just still not quite in sync with the rest of the team, and then once he did click and get in sync, it makes a huge difference. I mean, he's a really good player. Um, but it wasn't just that Hill communication. There were a couple of sloppy passes from him that led to pretty bad turnovers, and uh,
Yeah, I'll agree
I
in the
know he can be
first.
better.
I'll agree in the first. He had a couple of passes that you kind of hope he doesn't
Yes,
have in his system the whole year.
yes, and then he settled in. I agree, but I think for me, like I Eric Carlson, what we need, especially from this defense in general, right? To me, the weakest part of the Sharks game last night, again, jitters and all, and adjustments and all, still remain the defense.
yep,
And for me, like Carlson's like, when I look at who we have on defense last game, okay, I know what Burns' game is it's what it's always going to be, and that's fine. And it was used. I thought it was used fairly well. Um, Vlasic, I'm not expecting Vlasic to suddenly magically turn around. I'm not. Ferraro, I'm excited about. Middleton, Shemek, at this point, whatever. I thought Middleton had a fine game,
Yeah,
but
he's perfectly competent paired with Eric
yeah,
yep,
Carlson.
yeah.
He's
But I
yep,
but what I want is Eric Carlson to be the Eric Carlson that we know he can be when he has
yeah,
those flashes of brilliance. Because again, that's another one of those things where like I looked at the way the Sharks played last night, and again, I cannot emphasize enough how small the sample size is. One game, one team, but I saw a lot of things that were really, really, really encouraging to me, which I hadn't really felt. I just hadn't felt excited in a while for Sharks hockey in a roster. And Carlson, to me, is still, even with last night, even when he did settle in, is one of those players where I need that consistent for 3 periods. And if we can get that
hmm
consistent for three
yeah.
periods, watch out because that shifts a lot of what the Sharks are going to be capable of.
I
But
guess
again,
I guess what
two
I would
periods,
Yeah, I think
not three.
what I would say to that is, Jumbo had his ill-advised passes as well, and we just learned to live with it from him. And I think that because these guys think they can make the really great players think they can just make any pass, right? It's
Yeah.
part of what makes them so effective is that sometimes they're correct. And I think
Well,
I think we just have to live with occasionally Carlson is gonna not connect. I mean, that's and again, the better the rest of the defense is and the better the goalie is around him, the more sustainable that is because it was
yeah.
non-sustainable
Exactly.
with Jones in net.
Yeah, and I thought Hill for the most part did a great job. I think again I think for me yeah I agree Ben. I mean I'm not expecting him to be perfect at all, but the Sharks D and the roster as a whole and again I'll excuse it because it's first game,
Yeah,
but like they can't be playing 2 out of 3 periods. You got to play all
right,
three
right.
periods, and that's where I need Carlson to step up a little bit more. But
hmm
again. one game, first game of the season, so I give a bit of a pass.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hope we see somebody else on the bottom pairing. Like I like Shimmick up until the surgery, and then he seems to not have that leverage power that he had before to really push people off plays or like spring back into position. And I mean, his positioning was never amazing. And then have him and Vlasic together, it's painful. It's
It's
cringy.
bad.
I with that said though, I wasn't like looking away from the game anytime they were on the ice, and that was nice. Like
Yeah, to
it's
not be
hard.
freaked out.
Well, yeah, it's because there were a few plays where you see Vlasic's age, you see the damage he's taken because you see him sort of one on one trying to push the opponent puck carrier to the boards to shut down the play, and he does his normal sort of stick sweep where he used to just be lightning fast with his poke checks, and it was just a beautiful thing because no one could get by him. And you just see him reaching. You see people, managing the gap so that he can't pressure. And the second he tries to step in, they go around him, and it's hard to watch. Like, because we all remember the days when you wouldn't go up Vlasic's side because you would not get by him,
Yeah.
and it's not that anymore. And then have Shimmick on the other side, and Shimmick is not going to stop you at the blue line. Like, if you have any space, you're just gonna go around him. Shimmick is best when he has like a guaranteed lined up hit, and the person doesn't see it coming. And
Did
that's
you watch?
not really the game anymore. So I don't know. I
Did you
like
watch the
Shimmick
post
for
game? Just out of
no,
curiosity. So
nope.
so one thing that was really interesting, um, and a little alarming, I guess. I mean, it was I
Uh-oh.
suppose it was honest, but they interviewed Bugner. They interviewed Eklund, which Eklund's interview was I mean, he sounds like a full-fledged adult other than his actual voice. Um, but
I'm
they
a
talked to
real
Hurdle.
boy.
I know, but they talked to Hurdle, and I think Hurdle said like 10 times. He literally said, "We don't have the skill. We don't
Hmm.
have the skill of other teams. We don't. We
Yep.
don't. We don't." And his entire interview was literally him just repeating that ad nauseum, and then throwing Indy. So we have to work harder. And I thought that was fairly interesting. Not for Shemek specifically, but uh, there was an awareness, obviously, at least with Hurdle, but I'm sure the rest of the team that like maybe these guys aren't the most skilled players. But the funny thing about it to me was I don't necessarily know that I saw that reflected on the ice because what I
Yeah.
saw, and especially from a lot of the younger guys, and Balcers too. Balcers to me was one of my favorite players to watch last night. What I think thought he was such a great, re pickup, I guess. But it looked like the Sharks this year, again, small sample size, one game. I felt like we saw some displays of skill. Now, some of it got a little sloppy at points, and towards the end of the game, it got a little alarming, especially in the last minute or two. But I didn't feel that the skill was necessarily lacking. I felt
Mm,
that the skill needed to be ironed out a bit, and
well,
again, some of that's players being a little bit more on the same page. Not to say that I didn't feel they were, but again, I think there were a couple of moments where players were out of position, trying to do a little too much. Again, Eklund would end up on hurdles, all the way on the other
yeah.
side of the ice. You don't need those two guys right there. But again, that's experience and that and jitters and other stuff that kind of goes out. But I just thought it was really interesting that Hurl kept bringing that up.
Well, I mean, Hurdle can't say what the real problem is. It's not a lack of skill. That's not really even the right word. Like
Right.
the problem is that the guys you're relying on, uh, to anchor this team, they're past their sell by date.
Yeah.
A couple of
Mm,
them, right? He can't say, yeah, our bottom defensive pairing is bad and should feel bad. He can't do that. Um, and I think he's right if you substitute the word talent. This team is not as competitive as some other teams in the league in terms of just talent up and down the lineup, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
The bottom pairing is trash, and there's a couple guys who are getting minutes that I just don't understand on the forward core. Like, look, I don't hate 83 at all, Long Beach native Matt Nieto. I don't hate him. He's a serviceable player, but I don't understand why he's here.
Yeah, I
And
don't
we've
understand
got Barabanov
what he
and
brings at this point either. And he
Yeah,
had a couple
yeah,
of nice plays last game, but I still I just feel like there's better younger.
it's fine. Yeah, that's the key, right? Like
yep.
he is utterly replaceable on this team. It does not make sense.
Be
Um,
careful. If you say he's replaceable, a Marlowe perked up his ears near a
no, no,
phone
no,
somewhere.
no. I mean replaceable as in like you
With
could.
what we
I
have.
mean you're right. Marlowe could replace him and would be even worse.
Ouch.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then I don't, of the young guys, I don't get what Lane Peterson has done to
Um,
earn a spot on this roster.
Yeah,
Those are my
I
two.
agree.
Size and physicality. That's why Peterson's there instead of Barabanov or
Well,
Leonard.
Barabanov's still kind of hurt. I think that's part of why he's not
Oh,
playing.
okay.
Yeah,
And
but if you want that, why wouldn't you try Raska?
Yeah.
right, or the new
But it's
or
size.
Gadjevich, who I think he was having visa problems, as I recall.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, like, of the young guys who you could have awarded out of camp a spot here, I don't see the Lane Peterson thing. I just don't.
I agree with you, and I was thinking about this because I was like, why is he consistently getting pulled up more? And then it's like, oh, he's bigger and he throws hits. Like that's what I think it is. Because I agree.
Yeah. I think what would encourage me is it's clear that there are enough changes on the roster that this team feels different again, despite the fact that it has a couple of, veteran anchors who have been here for forever. My hope is that the Sharks stick with pieces of this long enough to let these things really develop, because it would be, last night showed a lot of tenacity from a team that really just struggled to show that well and coherently the last two seasons in particular. And I get the last two seasons were unusual and hard, and there was a lot of stuff going on. But, I felt like the team went down 2-0. They didn't give up. In fact, if anything, they really came back harder, and then they really just kept that energy going up until about the last two minutes or so. And it is so refreshing and encouraging to see a Sharks team play with that momentum in that way and not just have it be either inconsistent or give up. I mean, even the period start, even though both goals were relatively early were relatively early in their periods, I didn't feel like the Sharks were asleep.
Yep.
And that's God, I can't tell you the last time I felt like the Sharks were awake. And that encourages me. But again, here's the thing, and this is a big thing. We keep harping on it because, Boog's kind of to date has been, like the bore, like half the bore. It's just like I hope they look at things and they, sure, you make a personnel change or two, but don't just mix up all these lines massively. Like let some of this stuff settle in. Use some of these early games, especially since it's a tough road trip to begin with, and just especially with these young guys, like don't just throw Eklund all over the place. Don't move Dahlin all over the place. Like let some of this settle in and let these guys get used to each other. Because, again, I think my story of the game was first period, things came out, energy felt okay, but there was, some messiness and some disconnectedness. And then as the game went on, it seemed like the players just started to get smarter for the most part and fit in. And again, Eklund, I think, is a prime example of that. Like first period Eklund was, all right. Second period Eklund felt a lot better. Third period Eklund felt better. And I think I felt the same with Dahlin and bouncers and all of this. So I just hope there's some consistency in there.
The thing I would add to that I think is plus side is that the Sharks drew penalties.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they can count on that happening every night. I mean, I think that's part of what did give the Sharks so much, turning the ice in the other direction through the second and third period is that, their goals also coincided with times that the Sharks were on the power play or heading to the power play, right?
Yeah.
And the Jets are a historically undisciplined team, so you can't expect that is going to happen every night, I think.
Yeah. But it was nice that it felt like the Sharks were relatively disciplined. I mean, I know I'm going to throw shade at Kane here for a second, but I didn't feel like anyone was taking like a really stupid penalty at any point in time, and that makes a huge difference, especially if you're going to be that team with less talent or skill or however you want to put it. Like then you got to be the smarter team. And you got to be the team that works harder. And I thought that the Sharks really did that last night.
Yeah.
Well, you also have to be the team that helps each other, and that's the thing I really loved. And I loved this in the preseason too, and I'm really happy to see it carry through where the team is moving as a unit. And you're not seeing the thing we see in the last few seasons where it's, a lone shark against 3 opponents. And it's like, well, that puck is gone. And the few times where it did seem like a shark was making a rush on their own, it was a line change. Or it was Carlson trying to run the ice. And it's just so nice to see. It's so nice to see a line playing as a line. And it's kind of hurts that it's been so long that we could say that. But yeah, like they're playing together and they're playing off of each other. And that was really, really good to see.
They just looked happy yesterday. Throughout the game, they looked happy. They looked like they were cheering for each other at every camera shift. I haven't seen this many smiles in a while, and I do believe that a lot of that has to do with that youth injection. I do believe it has to do with Hertl stepping forward maybe a little bit more than he has in the past. Not to say he wasn't great in the past, and I would not be shocked if some of that wasn't coming from Cogliano and Bonino. Certainly on the ice, I felt like Cogliano was again, I saw him up in the play and really just forechecking and other things a lot more than I was expecting to see him. I just feel like a happy Sharks team is a fun Sharks team to watch and a good Sharks team.
Well, winning is fun.
Of course.
And winning games.
But they weren't winning the entire time. Even when they made their slow, even when their comeback started, they were just elated for each other. You could feel the energy popping off of them, and that's a great feeling.
Yeah, like I don't feel I agree with Alex. They were down a goal, they're down 2 goals, but it didn't seem like they were really phased. They're still playing to win. They're still playing for each other.
Wait, hold on. I'm calling it. Before I forget, I want to ask you a question because I'm going to forget if I don't ask you it right now because this is your favorite topic. Did you or did you not notice Tomas Hertl's face-off percentage?
Because this is my favorite topic?
It was 86%. Because every time we have a podcast, you talk about how, and it is important, but you talk about the face-off percentage in the draw, and he was 86% last night.
What was Bonino
Awesome. Bonino was at 43%. Oof. Couture was at 62%. Weatherby was at 57%, and Peterson was at 50%. But 86% is terrific, and you got to remember that Hertl also played, almost 17 minutes of the game, right? So awesome. We need that.
It's going to be interesting to see how this team stacks up against more rounded out teams. Because the Jets are kind of like the Sharks, where they've got a good offense, but their defense has problems, and they're backstopped by a good goaltender. So we haven't had that in a while. But going against let's see what happens when we go against Tampa or let's see what happens when we play the Islanders defense. And I think those will be some better looks as to how well this offensive core and the whole team can actually work through a team that is really good in their own zone.
Yeah.
But I honestly feel this team has gone through the preseason and shown enough consistency from that preseason into this first game that maybe they're actually going to teamwork their way through those challenges. Oh, yeah. I'm super interested to see. I feel like if they can spin this sort of team play through the season, then we could be a dark horse. But of course, it's within the first 10 games of the season, so everything's awesome and everything's wonderful. Do
you know who I'm enamored with right now? And it's the same person that I was enamored with in the preseason. And there definitely things. Yeah, there's things he needs to work on.
100% shooting.
Or there's definitely stuff that he needs to work on. But I really enjoyed this game.
1 shot, 1 goal. So Weatherby, you're only allowed to shoot if you score.
But even that, like, in the plays where he didn't have a point, and again, he's got some things he needs to adjust for sure. But boy, when he was playing with Hurdle and Eklund, uh, it just I just felt like he was in the right spot almost every single
Yeah.
time, and on the offensive side, and it made for some really, again, exciting. The four guys. I'm gonna four guys who some did better than others, but I really enjoyed watching Bowsers. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
watching Weatherby. I really enjoyed watching Eklund, and I enjoyed watching Dahlin. I know Dahlin didn't necessarily,
I thought Dolan
you
was
know,
very good. He didn't get
I
rewarded, but I thought he was very
yeah,
good.
exactly. He was fast. There were so many times where there was that one play. I think it was Dahlin, right, where Winnipeg's goalie just made a freaking incredible save.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, but
That was
Dahlin was in the
heartbreaking.
right spot, and he put the puck in a fine place. It was just a really damn good save. But again, those guys, yeah, I'm excited. Again, and I thought Cogliano was great too. I'm excited.
No,
I'm giddy.
Dolan got robbed. Like that was good save, Helly. That was it made me sad.
Yeah. Well,
Um
okay. Let's go over the goals real quick because we actually haven't talked about those details. So, the game started first period about 4:20 into the first. Pierre-Luc Dubois scored a goal for Winnipeg, and then in the second, about a minute 10 in, Andrew Kopp scored, and then that's when the Sharks sort of started their comeback, right? So around 3:38 in the second, Cogliano scored with assists from Couture and Burns, and then Jasper Weatherby scores his first goal on his first shot with assists from Carlson and LeBanc, and that was a real team effort there too.
Both,
By the way,
yep,
that was a
yep,
that
yep.
was a both those shots were actually kind
I
of the
was gonna
same
say,
shot.
yeah.
Yeah.
Both of those shots are real low percentage
Yeah.
shots.
But if you listen to the intermission stuff, Drew Remenda pointed out that is what the scouting reports said in terms of placement on Hellebuck. You don't want to get some of those low shots. Like Meyer tried a low shot that I thought was really interesting just because it was going through traffic, but in general, that's a shot that's going to beat him, and they did it twice in a row.
Right.
And then in the third period, Tomas Hurdle scored with an assist by Weatherby and Eklund. Bowsers scored. That is the one that that's the one that led to the fight and the power play right off of the face-off, and that was assisted by Myron Hurdle. And then Real Bowsers sort of illegally scored again, which was funny, and the team gave him a hard time for doing it. It was obviously called back. And then the game started to there's some back and forth. Jansen Harkins scored for Winnipeg, and then the last two, I was pretty nervous the last 2 minutes when it was 4-3 because it definitely looked like there were a couple of moments where I think Hill played some really great goaltending. A couple of Sharks players made some pretty key stops because Winnipeg was definitely sniffing for that fourth goal. But that's just sort of the game summary.
I feel like Hellebuck's cross goal crazy robbery save on Dahlin was his best save, and I feel Hill's best save was this blocker save he made off of some shot from around the
I know the one
circle.
you're talking about.
It was sweet. It was one of those blocker saves you love to see where the goalie just looks angry at the puck.
Yeah, you know what? One of the things that I was glad was called out immediately by the announcers was on that third goal. There's really nothing Aiden Hill could do.
Oh yeah,
but they immediately came back and said, we've been talking up the fact that he's really good with lateral movement. Just FYI, that there is no lateral movement that's gonna make that save. Listen, guys, a really good first game. 3 stars of the week. Colin, why don't you go first? Who are your 3 stars? There's only one game, so
yeah. I mean, it's first star is Hurdle, second star is second star is Weatherby, third star is Cogliano.
Gotcha. Yeah, those are all fair.
And just that shorty rush and that ripper shot was just God. I hate that I'm cheering for a former Duck.
Ben.
I think rewarding all of those guys is fair to some extent, but I'm gonna go, and I think Hurdle is the clear first star, just because as you say, if you want to spot the actual leadership on this team, it is It is Hurdle. Is he playing for a contract? Probably, but also this is just who Hurdle has always been. I don't think it's
Yeah.
Yep.
necessarily, fair to say that he's doing anything more or different than he did before. I think he's just
He
growing
just
into doing it more on the ice.
yeah.
Yep.
He just seems like such a likable,
Yeah,
good guy who really roots for his teammates, like genuinely
yeah,
roots for his
yeah.
friends.
I totally agree. So Hurdle's clear first star here. Um, my second star, I'm going to go with Cogs because I think that Cogliano played very well. Uh, with the puck, the shorthanded goal was pretty great. It played well defensively, and I'm going to actually give the third star to Benino for the same reason. I think Benino mostly
Yeah.
was played and was deployed defensively, so I don't think you get to see him so much on the offensive side of things, but I think he played really well, and I don't think he necessarily ended up getting the best line mates out of that. Uh,
No.
I mean, he's got
But he played
LeBanc,
rock solid.
and I think that's partly why we didn't notice LeBanc so much, as LeBanc was deployed defensively, and then he's got Nieto, who that guy's never going to score, so
Oh, come
you're
on
kind of
now.
on your own.
Yeah,
I,
I agree with Hurdle. I don't think there's a question. Just face-off percentage alone, and that energy, and that goal and assist, and the way that he really led his lines around, and all of that stuff, and his attitude. He definitely far and away my number one. My number two, I agree. I think it's Cogliano. Um, I really like in his first game the dimension that he brought to the Sharks. And again, I got more out of him than I was expecting in this first outing, and that's a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
And then for my third star, um, I'm going to make it a little bit of a tie. I'm going to give it to Weatherby. Just he scored his first goal, and again, I really liked his game. And not to slight Dahlen or Eklund, because there's a lot of great stuff I thought they did too, but I for some reason Balsters just kept appearing on my radar nonstop,
Yeah.
especially in the second and third period. So he's going to get my third star of the game. Now I know you're probably wondering, well, Sharks are undefeated, right? That means they're first in the division. The division. Well, no, because they've actually played less games than pretty much everyone except for Calgary. So the Sharks right now, they are one game played, one win. They've got 2 points. They are sitting technically in fourth place behind Edmonton, who's in first, Seattle, who's in second, and Vancouver's in third. Again, those two teams have Edmonton's played 2 games already. Seattle and Vancouver have both played 3 apiece. Right behind them are the Los Angeles Kings, who have played 2, but they've won 1 and lost 1. And they are also tied below that with Anaheim and Vegas. And Calgary's just kind of, hanging out. But again, small sample size for them as well. The Sharks now go on a pretty lengthy road trip. And I brought this up last podcast, and Drew and Brody brought it up a lot. But what a freaking weird schedule, because the Sharks don't even play in the division until geez. Trying to even see when Calgary
they don't see
on the
Vegas
ninth.
until like the spring,
No.
right?
No, yeah. My wife yesterday was like, when do they play the Kraken? And I said December 14th. So really, the Sharks play a division team. If I'm unless I'm scrambling the divisions again, they play Calgary on the 9th of November, and then that's it as far as the division until you get to December. So the next couple of games are all on the road. They play against Montreal in Montreal on Tuesday. Then they have the trademark Sharks back-to-back, although not a Saturday-Sunday game, a Thursday-Friday game. So hope y'all are able to watch that, because those are going to be a bit early at 4 p.m. Pacific and 3 p.m. Pacific. But the first of that back-to-back is against the Ottawa Senators, and the second is against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then, we will likely have this might be going on as we pod, or maybe we'll delay the pod a little bit, but that following Sunday, they're playing Boston at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. So Sharks going on a road trip here. It was nice to have the fans back. Hurdle made a big point in his post-press game press conference that having the energy back, especially at the tank, made a really big difference for them. And you could tell that he was genuine about it. And I don't think that's just pumping up the home fans. I think these guys, definitely missed having actual people in the stands. And the San Jose Arena is a great place for that. And the fans were really excited this season. So that helped with some of that energy and momentum, I'm sure. But they're not going to get that the next couple of games. And some of these teams are looking better than others. So I think we're going to find out whether or not this was just one game of good Sharks and semi-consistent Sharks, or whether Booner's going to mix everything up, or whether or not that was just Winnipeg. So lots to look forward to. Should be a lot of fun. Listen, that concludes this week's podcast. So excited to be excited about the Sharks. So excited to see them smiling. So excited to see the speed and the fun and the camaraderie. You'll notice that I'm not bringing something up, and I'm doing it intentionally because I don't want to spoil this game with the what if question that I'm sure is looming. In fact, my wife asked if they were going to ask Bugner that what if question, and I'm not going to bring it up beyond that. But that concludes this week's of Sharks Hockey. You can check us, Ben, out on Twitter at Circling the Cup. You can check us out on Facebook. At this point, we're really just posting when the live stuff, when the podcast is live, but still always answer your questions on Facebook at facebook.com/Circling the Cup. You can check us out on the web at circlingthecup.com. That's where we put some of the podcasts. You can, of course, subscribe to us on Apple's podcasting app, and Android people, well, go after yourself. No, I'm just kidding. You can find us through wherever you find podcasts, I think, at this point. Hey, and if you do,
just
do
go
us
to
a favor.
Spotify, y'all.
Yeah, you get a Spotify too. Just do us a favor. Give us rate us, give us a review. That helps, bump us up, I guess. And last but not least, it's time to say goodbye, gentlemen. Say bye-bye.
Undefeated.
We're technically
Colin,
not skating our best lineups, so the best is yet to come, I guess.
Bye-bye. Awesome. A lot of fun, guys.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yep.
You know what's really funny? We're still on the YouTubes right now.
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you, Dave. You throw the Doug Wilson first star for keeping Kane away from this team. Doug is real close if this team can play consistent to earning his cyclical forgiveness. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. I'm still aiming to be a seller at the trade deadline. I have no idea what we'll sell because everything is locked down.
Well, we'll see. But my wife immediately turned to me and asked about she was like, so do you think Doug is sly like a fox? And I go, I'm 50-50 on whether or not he saw this happening, but I can't, I can't not credit him for the players in camp either. So,
Yeah.
Doug's Doug.
Oh man. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing, Nieto and Peterson sat in favor of Barabanov and Gadjevich.
Yeah, I'm really glad I'm really glad you brought up the Nieto thing, because I had the same thing. I have no Nieto hate, but I don't understand why he's on the roster or what he's bringing. And it's not in like I'm horribly upset with him.
No,
I don't get what the team seems to see.
We know what he is. He has no shot, and there's
no upside.
He's fine. But he's not.
There's no upside.
Yeah.
Yeah, he fills the spot. I was watching for him in the game, and I was like, cool. There's Nieto. Oh, nothing's really happened. Okay. Whereas Bonino was absolutely rock solid. It was one of those fourth line centers where you're just like, yeah, we're good. Don't need to worry about this.
Yeah.
Bonino and Cogliano this game look like really smart pickups, and especially when you take into consideration.
Yep.
The locker room vibe. I mean, this team definitely felt different. So
here's something to keep an eye on. I didn't get this into the podcast, but I'm going to be watching it. So neutral zone face-offs, they're putting Logan's line out.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll occasionally give one to Weatherby, Cogliano, Peterson, and Bonino, LeBanc, Nieto. Defensive zone, it's primarily Bonino, of course, right? But they'll also give defensive zone face-offs occasionally to Couture or Weatherby. Offensive zone face-offs only, Hurdle, Eklund, Balsers.
Yeah.
Yep.
which all of that is great.
So
all
nice
of that
to see.
Is fine. I just wanted to.
Well, it's actual coaching. Oh my God.
Well, he knows what his lines are, or what he wants his lines to be, basically. So Couture is the, you can get possession and get into the zone with this line. Great.
Yep.
You want these guys to have offensive zone possession great.
Yeah.
You never want to see these guys try to win a defensive zone face-off.
Yeah.
Also great.
Are you saying strategy? Strategy?
So
Probably more tactics, but yes.
Yeah.
the thing I love watching on the hurdle line, and this is gonna grow old if it keeps doing this, but I love watching Hurdle look like he'll get the puck somewhere in the neutral zone. He'll look for the through pass to get across the blue line. He won't find it, so he'll just chip it into the other team's zone, charge after it himself, and then just stick his ass out to impale whoever tries to challenge him while the rest of the team catches up to him.
He really is Jumbo Jr. the way he plays, and I love it.
Yeah. I
All
agree.
right. I got to go, guys.
right.
This was awesome.
Yep.
Take it easy.
All right, bye,
Next
guys.
week.